What is neuroplasticity of the brain? And why should you care? Does it matter to you? Stay tuned and I'll explain. Hey, I'm Dr. Ekberg with Wellness for Life, and if you'd like to truly master health by understanding how the body really works, then make sure you subscribe and hit that notification bell so that you don't miss anything. So plasticity refers to the ability to mold or shape or change or reshape something. And we used to believe that the brain was kind of set, that it developed over the growing years, and then once we reached adulthood, then it pretty much stayed the same. And that is not true. In the last 20-30 years, we have learned a lot about the brain and about brain plasticity, the neuroplasticity, the ability for the brain to actually physically change. So think of the brain as an enormous circuitry, like an electronic circuit, except this circuit has 100 billion transistors, and in the brain cells are called neurons. And imagine each of these brain cells connect to other brain cells, and each cell makes on average 5,000 to 10,000 connections times 100 billion. And some of these cells, like in the cerebellum that coordinates thought and movement, the cerebellum, some of those cells can make 250,000 to 500,000 connections per cell. So the complexity of this neural network is enormous, and it manages everything about you. So the purpose of the brain is to coordinate and regulate things. So you have 100 trillion cells, and each of those cells is like an independent little unit of life. And the brain's job is to make those 100 trillion cells work together as a unit. So the brain receives about 1 billion bits of information every second, and none of those bits are ignored or missed. So every bit coming in has a consequence. So the brain receives, it processes, and it executes. The sum total of that is called regulation. The better it works, the healthier you are. But here's the interesting part. A computer can also process a lot of different things, but the processing doesn't change the computer. The brain, however, it changes with that information. So if information comes in and takes a certain path, then it's going to increase the likelihood of that path being executed or firing again. So the more that we use a path, the more that we strengthen it. So that's how plasticity works, that the more of a certain input that we give to the brain, the more resources and the more pathways and the more synapses the brain is going to allocate to that particular function. So the brain is actually being recreated every single day. But if you give it mostly the same information today as you did yesterday, then it's going to recreate the same brain. However, if you start changing things up, if you do this on purpose especially, and you start thinking different, you start acting different, you start doing different things, then you're going to recreate another type of brain. You're going to make the brain change. So if you keep things the same, you'll recreate the same. If you keep changing, then it'll change with you. Some interesting areas where this is good to understand is in the case of a stroke, for example. In the case of a stroke, there is an occlusion. There's a problem where the blood supply to the brain is actually blocked, and a portion of the brain, small or large, is deprived of oxygen long enough that those cells actually die. So that function isn't there. Those cells are never going to operate again. But if we understand neuroplasticity, and we understand that the more that we can change things up and make the brain, help the brain become flexible, the more the brain can allocate, reallocate those functions to other areas. One very interesting aspect of that is with blind people, when they lose their vision or they never developed it, then the areas in the brain that normally processes vision are not needed for that purpose, so the brain can use them for other things. So even though they're supposed to be used for vision, we don't need them for that. So with blind people, they use their fingertips a lot more. They start to read with their fingertips. And as a result, the area that normally processes touch starts expanding and using up real estate in the visual cortex, the area of the brain normally used to process vision. So they can essentially see with their fingers, if you will. And the brain is amazing that it will constantly reallocate its resources to the things that you do most. So you have to ask, how do you want it to work? One definition of genius is that it's just a persistent attention to a particular topic. If you persistently focus on a particular topic, then the brain will start allocating more resources to that, and you get really good at it, or someone might call you a genius or an expert. So by understanding a little bit more about plasticity, by understanding that the brain is not set, it is not what it is, you can actually change it. And by understanding how plasticity is strongly influenced by factors such as attitude, when you feel positive about something, the brain works better. Doubt and negativity and anxiety and negative feelings interfere with the flow of those creative processes. And also by understanding visualization, that you can visualize something and that the brain experiences it as if it actually happened, and by understanding the value of repetition, now you can start making plasticity work for you to create a brain and to create some pathways and some habits that work better for you for what you'd like to accomplish and do. So let me know if this was interesting, if it makes sense to you, and if there's any part of this that you have experienced in your life. I'd love to see some comments if you want to share what this has done for you, or if there's some past events where you can kind of see how this has been working. If you're new to this channel, make sure that you subscribe and that you hit that notification bell if you enjoy this sort of content, so that we can keep it coming your way. Thanks for watching.